The door clicked, and Mason nodded at Karen as she stepped into the cockpit and closed the door behind him. The captain and first officer were busy turning knobs and flipping switches. A thick manual lay open on the first officer's lap. Mason tapped the captain on the shoulder. "I'm Steve Mason, the FAM on this flight. Is there a problem?"
"It would appear there is," the first officer said. "Richard Worth."
He stuck out his hand. They shook. Captain Anderson glanced back at Mason. "We lost VOR and GPS as soon as we came out of that storm. No signals for the last 30 minutes. It's like all the radio waypoints and satellites went down at the same time." "And the plane is okay?" Mason asked. "The plane is fine," Anderson said. "Actually, the instruments are fine. They're just not receiving any signals."
"And I can't raise anyone on the radio," Worth said. "It's working, there's just no one out there receiving."
"I take it you couldn't avoid that storm?" Mason asked.
"Came out of nowhere," Worth said.
"IRS is still operating and indicates we're on course," Captain Anderson said. "But it's an internal system that doesn't rely on external signals." He glanced at the overhead IRS panel, then the flight management system screen, and finally the nav display. "We should be passing over Savannah right about now." Worth peered out through his window.
"Clear skies. I see the coast."
He shook his head.
"Are you sure we're on course?"
Captain Anderson checked the IRS screen again. "Yep, Savannah is directly below." The first officer raised his head and locked his eyes on the captain.
"There's no Savannah down there."
Captain Anderson turned to look out his window. Mason leaned over and took a peek. The coast was clearly visible, but there was nothing resembling a large city. "We must be off course," Captain Anderson said. Worth had his forehead against the window glass.
"We've flown this route 1,000,000 times. I can see Hilton Head, Calabogie Sound, and the inlets for Savannah, Wilmington, and Little Ogeechee. The landmarks are there, only the city is missing."
Worth slowly raised his head and turned to look at Captain Anderson. The captain met his gaze.
"That's impossible,"